And we're recording.
All right.
Illumisoft podcast number 3. Today is July 26th, 2020. For reference, protests still going on. Apparently, Portland is besieged by protesters and federal agents trying to stop the protesting.
Well, and in addition to that, we've got the debate by the politicians about additional stimulus money and unemployment insurance, which, not that anybody's tuning in for our political views, Dan, but or I guess our take on current events necessarily, but it's kind of one thing to have a giant pandemic going on, combined with social unrest. I wonder how many things that we all can juggle all at once. Right.
Yeah. It's challenging. I'm sure everybody is dealing with this added level of stress. Right. When do I even go to the store, right, to avoid the risk of catching something?
Well, I'll give you my story from yesterday. So my daughter, Maddie, graduated from high school yesterday, and they originally weren't going to have graduation because, imagine sticking all those people inside a giant auditorium, right? So they did away with that, but what they did decide to do was they held it in a giant football stadium out south of Kansas City. And they assured us that they were going to socially distance the audience, and it wasn't really socially distanced. And so we were all wearing masks and everything, but there was just a lot of young people sitting around us that didn't have masks on. There were some families that didn't have masks on.
Wow.
And we were just kind of sitting there, and Jody, my wife, and I, we were just kind of, trying to stay focused on what the purpose of us being there was, which was to see our daughter graduate from high school. But it was interesting how many other topics were rolling through your head, right, while you're sitting there.
Right.
Trying not to get frustrated and trying to be understanding. And at the same time, it was like, as soon as she walked across the stage, we were,
that's good.
Right. So, but yeah, I mean, it's, I think the thing that Jody and I agree on is, masks have become such a political football that we don't really look at it that way as blue or red issue. We look at it more as like a citizenship issue, right?
Member of society issue.
Right. Yeah. And so when we see people that don't wear masks, I wouldn't go so far as to say that we think they're bad citizens, but we definitely think that it seems rather selfish,
I don't disagree with that. It can seem that way. Right. What I've been trying to do this week, because I know that so much of this has become politicized, right? Some people are not wearing masks because they feel their leadership has led them in that direction.
Right.
And some people are wearing masks, because they feel socially obligated to, rather than just common sense that if this is an airborne disease, put a mask on, right? And I feel kind of guilty when I wear my mask, because I know that when I breathe out, the air goes right out of it. Mm. When I breathe in, I kind of hold it against my face so that I have to breathe the air through the mask, which I feel like is protecting me far more than it's protecting anybody else.
Right.
The whole idea of wearing a mask was so that you're protecting the people around you. Right. But I don't know that it really works like that.
Yeah. I mean, I was reading an article yesterday just about it's just so interesting to me, all the topics that just to think back to even February, the topics that we all have integrated into our daily lives now is just so interesting, right? We're having conversations about masks. We're having conversations about when to send our kids back to school. I mean, it's just so different. But I was reading this article about the mask thing, and just in terms of, okay, well, today we're going to have a conversation about what are good masks and what are bad masks, and which ones filter well versus which ones don't filter well. And so it's just, these things that we're having to think about now.
It's a new world.
You wake up. Yeah. You just wake up in the morning and you think, wow, I just wasn't even thinking about any of this 6 months ago, but so
used to be you could get up and go to your daughter's graduation and actually enjoy it. Hopefully you get to see her when she's crossing the stage and she gets to hear you clapping and the rest of your family without getting drowned out. And now it's this, am I putting my life in danger or my family's life in danger by supporting this event?
Right. And I guess this does tie into just the business a little bit, right? And at least the way I think of it, we're a small company, so our considerations for, people coming back to the office is way, way different. But I just, my wife works for a big bank, and, just the considerations that, and the steps that they're having to go through just to even consider bringing people back into the office is very complicated, because there's legal issues, there's productivity issues, there's, for a bank, there's security issues. I think that as a person, your safety kind of trumps, no pun intended, but, trumps, some of these precautions that companies are taking. So imagine a company saying, hey, Dan, we have taken the following measures to ensure your safety. Cut the amount of staff in half that are going to be in the office. We've regularly cleaning I mean, they can tell you everything they've done, but ultimately as an individual, if you don't feel comfortable, it's kind of difficult to force people to come back to work.
It's not right to try and force them.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. When our property manager asked us if we were going to come back into the office and what precautions we were going to employ, my question to them was, is the air in our office circulated throughout the entire building? Because if it is, then there's no way that I can protect my staff.
Right.
Which the answer was yes, which I assumed it was. We don't have isolated systems, especially in the age of this building. But yeah, there's a lot of people that are back at work here. But like you said, they're cutting staff in half and whatnot. But is it actually doing anything to protect them? Somebody showed up for work. We've got an email from property management saying somebody showed up for work last Monday. They took their temperature before they entered the facility, and sure enough, they tested, or they were warm, and then they went and got tested, and they tested positive for COVID. If they're carrying that thing for 8 or 9 days, then showing up for work the day before or the day before that clearly put people at risks. At risk. So if we can't prevent that, then we shouldn't be back at work yet.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the immediate thing, and this is maybe from all the years in the legal industry as to why I always think legal precautions first, is, the idea that you would accidentally send someone in to work that is contagious and spreads that disease, and you knowingly let that person in, presents some huge legal ramifications for you as a company. And I'm obviously, like I said, we're small, so we can have, most of our team works virtually anyway, but I'm just thinking of just larger corporations with a bunch of people, right? And just their legal risks that they would have if somebody, God forbid, died, right? I mean,
right.
So
I wonder if there is the reverse risk, right? Keeping them at home, right? I've heard some intellectuals out there saying that forcing people to stay at home, forcing them to stay out of work and locking things down, that suicide rates increase at a predictable rate, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But
Right. Well, and the article that I read yesterday was interesting because it said that initially when we all got dispersed to go work at home, there was this huge increase in productivity, right?
mhm.
And everybody was just kind of shocked by how productive people were. But imagine that you're a person that thinks now you're being evaluated on how well you work from home or not, because if you're not, then maybe I'm going to get laid off or get fired, right? So everybody is actively working, trying to work really hard, saying, hey, I can do this, right?
But that's what they should do, right? I mean, that's what you should do if you're at work. That's what you should do if you're at home. That's what you should do if you accept a position that is trading money for effort.
Right. But now what's happening is there's been this plateau where now productivity is kind of, as they measure it, I guess, sinking back down to maybe what's expected, right? A little bit. So,
which means people aren't working as hard. Right. Because if you avoid the hour-long, makeup, clothes, ironing, those kinds of things that you have to do every day in order to go into the workplace and be co-located with your team. If you avoid that and you avoid the drive there and you avoid the drive home, you avoid the having to make a sandwich before you leave and put it in a bag or a box or whatever.
Right.
I mean, you're saving a lot of time.
Right.
An hour and a half a day, probably minimum. Maybe some people cut corners, but you're saving at least 30 minutes a day. I'd say there's no way that you could not be saving 30 minutes. So you would expect that you could increase your productivity easily.
Right. Right. And there are all kinds of individual situations though, right? So, have you ever read that? I've never actually read it. I've just heard people talk, very positively about Tim Ferriss's like 4-day work week or.
Yeah, I did read it.
Yeah.
I actually tried to implement it though.
Yeah.
And it was incredibly impossible.
No.
He's got a lot of good ideas, but some of his things are like, hey, just set up a company that can do this for you. And, you got to interview them and make sure they're the right people. Yeah, there's a lot to that. Yeah. You spend 80 hours to save 3.
Yeah. And the only reason I bring it up is because some people, I think, look at it like you do, which is, I've got all this free time now to be much more productive and everything. And then, but the people that I start to, be a little bit sympathetic to is people that have kids, right? That now they're working parents. They used to send their kids to school. Now their kids are at home and now they're having to manage, raising kids and working from home all in the same space. And it has to be just that much more challenging to really be productive. Right. And it might depend on obviously it depends on the job that you have and the type of work that you have, but
it also depends on your parenting style. Right. I think some parents would think this was the best of both worlds. My little sister has worked remotely for 20 years for IBM and raised a family.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have any of the challenges. I talked with Chris Bodenheimer, my buddy that does the electronic stuff, and he's having a heck of a time with his daughter at home full time. She's pretty high energy, but also they have depended on sending her to school, right?
Right.
For some of the the energy that she gets it from her schoolmates and from her teachers at school. Now it's 100% them giving it. And I told him, dude, just enjoy it. Embrace it. This is life. And he said, you have no idea. Right. Clearly I must not, because I'm thinking, shit, that'd be great. My kids weren't that terrible when I had kids.
Right.
It was, you had to pay close attention to them, but it's like, hey, stop doing that. Hey, please don't do that.
Right.
Go get your room clean. But I mean, it's just minutes or moments of distraction versus I got to stop what I'm doing and go entertain them.
Yeah, and it depends, and obviously it depends on the age of the kids too, right? I mean, if you're trying to work and raise an infant, that's a different challenge than, you know, like for me, Maddie's 18. And so, you know, she doesn't require a lot of, you know, hand holding, or anything like that. So, but yeah, I think that, I mean, I do think that there are some parents that, you know, collectively, I know here in Kansas, you know, the governor recently pushed back when the kids were going to go to school, start school for K through 12. And I'm sure there are a lot of parents that are looking at that and they're saying, you know, wow, you know, I was kind of looking forward to maybe sending my kids back to school, maybe being a little bit more productive in my
Getting
job.
back to normal.
Right.
I think at this point we can give up on getting back to normal. That we can find a new normal.
Right. And I think that that's the interesting. I know. I know you're a pretty voracious reader, and you've read a lot about how people deal with change, and I think you know, and I've you know, in my experience, had to manage through a lot of change in the companies that I've worked for. And this would be, you know, this is definitely a new level of change to manage through. But you do really find out a lot about people when they're faced with the challenging kind of existential circumstances, right? You kind of understand, you know, how people deal with change, right? You know, I think that there's a certain segment of people, maybe even in our industry, that are pretty well adept at having dealt with this, right? Because as developers, you have to, you know, you have to have kind of an open mind towards things just because it's the nature of the job. But I think that there are other people that are looking at this and they're really struggling with, you know, how to deal with this. And to your point earlier about mental health, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. She's a teacher. She teaches gifted students in Kansas City, and she was explaining how her whole process has changed to teach these kids online. And she's like, Matt, imagine trying to teach a kid art, you know, in a Zoom call. You know, it's very challenging. And so the other side was, she's like, imagine trying to teach kids a science experiment, right? Because normally a science experiment, we're all huddled around the table and we're running the experiments and we're asking questions back and forth. And while you can mimic some of that in a Zoom call, it's just, there's that thing. And it's hard to explain, of people in a room together working on something. Right. And especially for young kids, I think that's, that would be challenging. I think as my wife points out, you know, as adults, we feel like we can adapt to changing environments a lot better. We've got more experience at it. Right. So yeah, I guess every time I interact with somebody, the first question that I want to ask them that if appropriate is how are you adjusting? Right. Because I always like to hear their stories about, well, you know, this has been really hard in my job, or this has been really challenging. And, you know,
that is a great question to really get to know somebody that you don't know yet. Or maybe even if you do, because that's something that we have all done inevitably over this time. And it's been it's a huge change. It has to be. Just your experience of going and seeing Maddie graduate.
Right.
It used to be you could go in there and you might talk to the people around you and share some, you know, some pride in your daughter and some happiness that, hey, yes, we've reached this point that our kids are graduating. And now you walk in there and you have to kind of get your shield on, right? You have to distance yourself. You don't want to talk to anybody. I see people actually, and I don't know if this is just a human nature thing, but they don't look at you as readily. Right. It's like they confuse covering their mask with just not wanting to be seen.
Right.
Or something. I don't know. But I've noticed that. And I've noticed myself smiling extra big through my mask so that people could see through the wrinkles in my eyes that, yes, I'm making a gesture at you of friendliness.
Right.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, I think that I had this experience where I had to go give blood for some testing that was done. And the girl that was doing it the first time I went, she was wearing a mask. And what I was thinking as she was taking my blood was I was thinking, is she having a good day or is she not? I can't really tell. Right. And then I went back the second time and she had switched to one of those like face shields where you could actually see her face. And all of a sudden I somehow could in my own mind say, oh yeah, she seems like she's having a good day. Just because I could see her entire face. Right. Yeah. But I don't know if she really was or not, but I reached that conclusion somehow. So.
Yeah, we all read micro expressions and we all make micro expressions, whether we know about them or not. But yeah, we use them, and it's become difficult to see people's face, their expression. How do they feel? It's kind of like everybody's been shot with Botox.
So Dan, I know we're of a certain age that we will remember this, but I think what needs to happen is we all need to wear mood rings. So as we're walking by, we could show up our mood ring and say, this is how I'm feeling today. Right.
I don't know if that would really work, but I think that I think I am, as a result of not being able to see people's mouths, I'm starting to be able to read their eyes a little better. I'm looking harder at their micro expressions around their eyes because I know that will tell me if they're smiling or smirking or something else. Maybe we'll all get better at that.
Yeah.
And most of the change for me is having to wear this mask and having to determine if and when I will go in close proximity to other people.
Right.
Like going to the store, right? I've got to go to the store and buy my supplies. Well, normally I would go whenever, like, oh, I'm driving by, I'll go ahead and stop and get that one item. But now I don't. Now I'll put that one item on my list. And when I go at the end of the month, I'll get everything at once because I don't want to go there every single day.
Yeah. I think whenever I ask people the question about how have you adjusted, I think the other question I asked a friend of mine yesterday was, it wasn't how you've adjusted, but it was like, what are the patterns that you've had to change? Right. Because everybody's a creature of habit. And this is the example that I gave was, she asked me if I listened to podcasts and I said, here's a funny story.
Nope.
I used to, was because what happened was I was using it as my drive-in time, right? I was driving into work, so I would listen to podcasts. That was a part of my routine, right?
You're not doing it now?
Right. And I've noticed that it's gone down because now it's not a part of my drive in and my drive home, right? That was the pattern. So now what I find, and this is Maddie said to me, she's like, that's just pathetic, Matt. So now what I do is I'll get in the car, I'll take my dog and put her in the back and I'll drive to the park and we'll drive around the park for a couple different times because she likes to obviously, and then I'll listen to the podcast while I'm driving around the park. And so
you find another reason to get in the car.
Right. So, but it is the need that we have. I mean, I understand the normal thing of it, right? But it is interesting, the need to hold on to the patterns that we have. And when we're asked to change those, how some of us are like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do it just differently now.
Right.
No big deal. Right. And then others of us are like, just fight it. Right. We just fight it by saying I'm angry because now I got to change my patterns. Right.
Yeah. We resist it.
Right.
That's, I think that's exactly what we do. I've noticed that pattern in myself just this week.
Yeah.
Actually, I noticed that when I was at the gym, this one particular guy, I let him irritate me. And I don't know why, because he's a good guy and he's a nice guy. But last week there were 3 machines available for him to do a particular exercise on, and he came over and kind of got into our space, mine and Tyler's, to do that exercise. And I felt it. I was like, and I thought that's ridiculous that I would feel that way. And so I made a vow that day to myself that I am not going to voice any negative things like that. If I see something that I think isn't right, I'm just not going to say it. Right. Because I know that feeling it is, a part of the discomfort. And then saying it helps me feel it even more. And it just makes that, that little pebble of discomfort into a boulder.
Right.
And so I said, I'm just not going to do it. And I was amazed, Matt, at how hard that was.
Yeah.
Even that one thing it's like, fine, I'm not going to voice anything, but I just really want to say something about that guy. For like 10 minutes, it was everything I could do to not say something, even in joke or in jest, because I often mask my discomfort or my dislike of something and joking about it.
Right.
But what I realized after, so this is a realization on top of a realization on top of a realization. I realized I was being negative and being, childish by disliking something in reality and going, I need to say something bad. So I said, I'm going to change that. And as a result of trying to change it, I realized how hard it was.
All right.
So I really focused on it. And then I realized that's pretty much all I do. That is all I do. I look around at the world and I find things I don't like. That's a pretty shocking and distasteful, right? A thing that I've noticed about myself. I mean, I'm glad that I have, because now I can go about changing it. But one of the things that I do a lot is I'm unhappy about the way this COVID thing is going. Mm-hmm. I go to a restaurant, went to Johnny's Tavern yesterday. Hadn't been there for months, 6 months or more. And I was going to order their Philly cheesesteak, and they don't have it anymore. Why? Well, they changed the menu when COVID came out. I said, and cheesesteak went off because of COVID. And so I realized, shit, I'm just really resentful about everybody, about the one lanes through the grocery store. I think that's silly. And so I'm pissy about it. Taking Philly cheesesteak off the menu because what? Because of the Cheese Whiz? I don't know. Anyway, it's been a really challenging situation, and I know everybody is challenged in similar ways.
I think that's interesting because oftentimes the best question that I ask myself when I feel like that's happening is I'm like, what is this really about? Right? Because it's
what is this? My feeling, my anger?
Right, yeah. Right. And I think that a lot of people right now are transferring their frustrations about small things from big things, right? The big thing is everybody's wanting to know when the new normal is going to feel better, right? I'm going to get a vaccine. Things are going to be headed in the right direction. But then they transfer that frustration into these little micro or minor kinds of interactions, right? So I'm going to take out this frustration on this thing, right? And the interesting thing about that is that I don't know what it's like I shouldn't say that. I rarely experience a feeling of just utter frustration about people or situations. It takes a lot for me to get frustrated. So the way my brain has always been wired is in a given, and I don't want to make myself out to be some sort of like monk or something, but I'm not wired that way to where I'm always thinking about how frustrated I am or how angry I am. That's not the way I view the world. And so when I meet people who have that kind of energy, it's hard for me to understand it. Much like it's hard for me to understand people to understand me. They're like, "Oh, all bunnies and flowers for you, right, Matt?" And,
mm-hmm. and I've had that question about you before too. I realize that you do realize all the stressors. You just don't let them make you volatile.
No, and not to have a little psychology session about Matt, but part of that comes from having a father who was just a ball of rage all the time.
Was
Right?
he?
Yeah. I mean,
You've never explained your dad in that way before.
No, he was, my dad was constantly trying to figure out, he always thought that people were trying to screw him somehow. Right. Mm-hmm. That's just, and, my dad was he was a union, mechanic, and he was constantly feeling like it was, 60s and the 70s, right? Unions versus organized, corporations. And there was this constant push and pull that was going on. So that was his framework for everything, was we've got to really watch out or somebody's going to screw us. Right. Because that's what unions were built for. Right.
Yeah. I think that was that whole generation.
Right. Right. And so it starts to weave its way into all of your other relationships, and some, for him at least. And so I observed that when I was a kid, and what I saw was somebody who was out of control. And I respected people who could be in control. And so the contrast to that, ironically enough, was my mother. My mother was very in control. She was very measured. She didn't get rattled over a lot of things. So she kind of counterbalanced my dad, which was probably why they worked so well. But that was,
so you had two opportunities to absorb from people, and you said, this seems like more me than the ball of rage.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and I say that, my father's still alive. So,
he'll be listening to this.
Right. He'll love that description of him. But I think that he understands the person he was. And I think, now he's in his 70s. So he's obviously not that person. He hasn't been that person, quite frankly, for a long time, because over the years, he kind of mellowed out a little bit.
Right. As we do.
And I think, quite frankly, a lot of it was his job, right? A lot of it was the stress was his job. And so I noticed it pretty distinctly after he retired.
That he mellowed?
Yeah. And he just, and even before that, a little bit more. I think that, raising two kids, who, in an environment that, there never was enough money, so, there's just the stress of life, but I think he kind of got to a place where once we got to where we were off to college and, we were having our own lives, and then he retired. I think all those things kind of contributed to him taking a different look at the world. And now when I sit down with him, I sat down with him on Friday and talked to him for a couple of hours, and it's a little bit of irony in that. So when my dad was working, he had a pension, right? Which, most young people now don't even know what pensions are,
right? But they don't exist anymore,
right? So his union, they contributed to a pension. Mm-hmm. And then what happened was, during the Great Recession, they mismanaged that pension money. And basically they came to my dad and his union, and this is a union of millions of guys right across the country. And they basically came to them and said, sorry, money's going to run out sooner than most of you guys are going to be alive, basically. Because the pension is supposed to last for their entire lifetime. Even when they die, it goes to their family. And so my dad, for the last 5 years, part of his group, this union, they literally have divided up across these millions of members, and they all flood Congress with calls and letters. So here's this guy who's 78 years old who thought he was done with the fighting of the union, right? And here he still is. Yeah, Matt, yesterday I sent 25 letters to congressmen. I called 15 different congressmen and told them that, they need to make this a part of the next stimulus package to fund the remaining part of our pension. And he's quite the, quite
Activist.
quite the activist.
Let me ask you this. It seems like retirement sucks, right? If you retire, you have to find something to do. You can't just quit being responsible or having a goal, or, I mean, life isn't like that. You always have to have something you're moving towards.
Right.
And this seems like he's adopted this as, his job.
Yeah. And that brings up a good point in that, this goes back to the idea of patterns and structure and goals, right? I've been, I had a chance for several years to where we would vacation down in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And that's basically mainly a retirement community. And I was around, there was a group of people that we would go down there because my in-laws had a place down there. And so there was it was a lot of, cocktail hours. And, they would all get together and talk about their careers and what they did. And some of these people were, one guy that was there was the CEO of Bethlehem Steel. So these were people that were successful.
Right.
And they had noted that when they retired, then they became really different people, right? He's like, this guy, the CEO that I was talking to, he said, man, I hate golf. I don't know why I play it now, but it's the only thing I know to do now that I don't run a company. And so I had this really important job, and I was busy all the time. And now I retired because I thought that's what we're supposed to do. And now I'm playing golf, and every day I go play golf, I hate it. And so
I would hate golf too, if I was no good at it, or but it's setting a goal and achieving something or making progress towards it that brings happiness.
It's a commentary on the way that we view work, right? I don't think it's a uniquely American thing, maybe, but we wrap ourselves really tightly around our work persona and and so then when that just kind of is gone, then it's like, who am I? Right? Am I my job? Am I my career? Right? And I think there's so much more that people are, my dad is an example again, where, maybe the letter writing campaign is his way to stay busy and stay active and keep his mind, right. And he gardens a lot. But I do think that the bigger question is that if I get to a point where I don't have to keep doing this, right, this work that I'm doing, and I choose to do, and I have the luxury of going to do something else, what would that be? Right.
You don't have a plan already?
No, I've got some ideas.
I do. When I do this, I have several things that I want to do. I want to build, like I've said, a product company, right? A software product, software as a service.
Right.
I have a couple good ideas. I want to travel the world. I want to do some benevolent humanitarian work. Right. That doesn't make me any money, but just just out of the goodness of my heart, I want to spend a good chunk of my remaining time doing things for the world. I mean, these are goals that I'm looking to get through with this one so that I can move on to the next one. I'm not looking to get through with it, but I'm certainly excited about the next thing, once this wraps up or gets to a place where I can do that.
And I've talked to enough people too, Dan, that, and I don't know what the right way to describe it is, but if you're a person that doesn't have a goal of doing something after they retire, your goal is to work as long as you want to work, as long as you can, and then you're going to be just happy with having enough money to retire and relaxing. and enjoying your life, whether it's traveling or whatever. I don't think we should, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but I think it's kind of a common social pressure that people feel like I've got to have some giant plan after I retire, or I got to have all these things I want to get done in my lifetime. But some people just want to work, right? They want to work.
And working is fine, right? But that's their goal. They want to keep doing this because they enjoy it.
Right.
What I think is misleading to people is that they work towards this retirement, but they never decide what thing they will try to get done during retirement. And without something that you're working towards, life becomes really tedious and monotonous. And you sit on the couch and you watch TV and you absorb all of this bland data, right. This blandness that comes in, and you tend to go to sleep, I think.
Right. Which is consistent with what I was saying about going to Hilton Head, right? Which was a lot of people they had this image in their mind of what retirement was, right? It was like, we're going to be so much more social, and we're going to go here, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And then what we saw a lot of what happened was that people would retire down to Hilton Head, and they would sit in their house, and it didn't become everything that they had hoped that it was going to become. And so, in a lot of cases, a lot of older people that I knew that I talked to, oftentimes what I would hear is, I would rather just go back to work. Yeah.
Yeah. And I get that too. I mean, change is hard. So if you have to learn something new so that you can be working towards something and making progress, that may be too much. I think it would be for some members of my family.
And I also think that in a way, I think this idea of retirement is changing, right? Because I mean, the average age of a person who, the mortality rate in the world right now has gone up quite a bit. At least by what I've read. And just, my dad's 78 years old, which I never thought he'd see that, right. So if people are working longer because they want to, if people are, more active and more physically fit for much longer, right? I think that our social structures about how we're going to deal with, people working longer and wanting to work longer, and they're still physically able to work longer, then I think it changes the way that we look at retirement. So
I think the way that we look at retirement is changing drastically. In fact, I think there's a whole group of younger people that don't really even understand what the word means. And I don't know that any of us did either. I mean, it has a vague meaning, and that means that you have completed your work career, right? I think it means that.
Right.
But ultimately, that definition means that you are done being productive, done, you have a chunk of money and that's good enough. You can just sit there and eat.
Right.
But I don't think that that's an acceptable definition. And I don't think the people that are coming up in the world today really buy into, a retirement, right? They don't see a pension, or we don't even hardly talk about those anymore. The closest thing that we have to it is a 401k,
right.
Or an IRA. Which most people don't put enough into. They certainly don't depend on that being their livelihood when they retire, for the most part.
Right.
So like my mom, they're going to depend on Social Security. She doesn't even depend on her own Social Security because she hasn't made enough throughout her life to fund herself. She's depending on my dad's, and he died 35 years ago.
Right.
36 years ago, something like that.
Right.
So I want to go back to something. I read a book this week. I'm actually rereading it. When I first got it, I listened to a couple chapters and I made up my mind I was going to return it to Audible.
Mm-hmm.
you can do. It's by Don Clifton. It's called First Break All the Rules. And he describes it as How to Be a Better Manager book. But what
Right.
I'm getting out of it is how to understand people and put them in the right positions within my company so that they're both successful and happy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really what it takes towards that. But some of the things that I've learned in there are the difference between talents, natural talents or innate talents, and things that you've learned, right? Skills that you can do now.
Mm-hmm.
And he explains talents as not being able to be teachable, right? And talents are things that you just do naturally. And some of the things that he described were things like, if you like to say hi to people, if you walk down the street and you want to greet people, that is a talent,
Mm-hmm.
right? It may not be a talent somebody wants to pay you for, but it is a talent. It's something that you do innately and you do it well. And those kinds of things that you can look at yourself and say, what is my nature? And then say, those are my talents. For me, as I kind of hinted at a little while ago about, the frustrations that I get, throughout my life, I've realized I see a lot of things. And that may be that is my talent, to look into the world and see injustice. I hope I can see that going forward without also feeling some anger or, something, because that kills me inside every little bit. Like being angry is not healthy.
Right.
But I have a talent to drive through this world or to, travel through this world and point out things that are going wrong that should be fixed and resolved.
Mm.
One of my peeves is drivers and how they drive. Right. Well, I've started to look at that a little differently, and I have less problems with the drivers on the road. I have accepted that none of them really know what they're doing, and they're probably all trying to do the best they can do. Right. So I've given up on forcing them to do it my way.
Right.
But it's enlightening to me to look at myself and go, well, maybe that's just my talent. Maybe I shouldn't try to not see these things that I think are unjust and just accept them and that I see them, and then only act on the ones that I think I can resolve or fix.
Mm. Right.
So this idea that he talks about of having talents and skills has made me look at myself a lot differently.
Right.
Rather than criticizing myself because I always see the bad in stuff, maybe think of that as, my superhero talent. Right.
Yeah. A lot of, I see a lot of that in terms of the way I see that as a positive thing in the day-to-day way that we work with clients is it's, oftentimes enough when we're talking to a client and I see a problem in a particular way. And then when you kind of come along, you do a much better job of like dissecting the issue at a much deeper level. So to your point, you're always looking at things out there in terms of maybe what's wrong with it and how it could be better. But there is a skill to not just saying, here's an issue, here's a problem, do this, move on, right? There's a difference between that and looking at an issue and breaking it down into its components and saying, actually, there are many different ways that we can go solve this problem or issue. Here's a bunch of different solutions, right? I think that's a different way to look at things that you're able to do much better than what I'm able to even do. And part of that is because you're technically more adept at solving these problems than what I am. But that's kind of one of the things that have always noticed about, when we're sitting in front of a client and they're telling us what the challenge is, I have this solution that I can come up with, but your solution always seems to be much richer in terms of the depth of the way that you're looking at the problem. Right. And I think that's true I think that's also consistent with the way you're describing looking at people that drive, right? There's
I'm a really good driver. I drive really fast. I get there fast. I won't get in a wreck.
Right.
But yeah, I look at other people and go, why can't you do this?
Right.
Which that's a mistake, but
right. Well, and I think the other thing that I always try to remind Jody is the question becomes, what's the end goal? Because if the end goal is achieved in a particular situation, the route or method that any individual uses to get to the end goal, if they achieve the end goal, then the journey to that goal is different for everyone.
I completely agree. That's kind of what he's saying. Don Clifton is saying too. Right. Too often we try to, we take the journey. We know what steps we took. So we try to help other people, do these steps. And that's, it would be really difficult for somebody to take my journey and produce the same results that I produce. All right. So yes, I'm really good at technology, but not because I've gone to school and learned it. I got into technology because I was really good at looking at a problem and going, oh, it's this and this and this and that, and then solving for whatever one needs to be solved. Right. So back to the talents versus skills, I guess, looking at code just came naturally to me. Right. And that's why I went into computers, because it gave me an opportunity to, if I really love donuts, I should be a baker.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think I read that book. I read it about, I don't know, like 10 years ago, I think maybe is when I read it. Cause he wrote the
rules.
Yeah.
Was it that old?
I thought it was, he had written another book before that, I thought. I think I shared this story with you. When I believe when I read that book, the one thing that I recalled and was probably fairly valuable kind of a lesson that I took from it that is very applicable to small business is, I had been working at the legal technology company for several years. I had gotten to know the owners really well. They trusted me. I was running the revenue generating portion of their company. And oftentimes I was finding myself in meetings with them and the other leadership team, and I was asking for permission a lot, right? I'm going to go do this. I'm just telling you, I'm going to go do this. And I remember reading that book and thinking a lot of times the best lesson in small business that leaders or people can do, even, from scaling all parts of an organization, is sometimes you take a risk, you make a decision on your own, you go out and do it, and the results are way better than what you could have realized. And ironically enough, when I did that in practice, oftentimes enough, they trusted me inherently, and I would make the decision without asking for permission. I would go do it, and they would say, "Oh yeah, that's exactly what I would have done, Matt." So as long as and I know we talk a lot about trust, but oftentimes enough, I think that, especially with the clients that we're dealing with, the mistakes, and we talked about this recently, the mistakes that we've made, maybe more specifically, maybe that I've made, has been always going back to the clients asking for permission. I'm just telling you that this is what we're going to go build. I just want to make sure because inherently we're fearful that we're going to go build the wrong thing, right? When in reality, as you've kind of reminded us recently, has been they are coming to us because of our expertise, right? And so it's our job to make decisions, make recommendations that is consistent with our experience and our expertise, and to go out and do those things, right?
Right.
Versus consistently going back to clients asking for permission to to make
Right.
certain things, right?
That's friction.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't know why I've jumped on that word lately, but a lot of things seem to fall in that category of friction.
Right.
And I can tell you that I've had people work for me that have taken the initiative to go out and do something, and it has gone right or gone wrong. And my style is that I look at what they did and I look at the reasons why they made that decision. And then I add a lot of appreciation that they did it without the fear that they needed to ask me first.
Right.
And then I move forward. But those people just need a little guidance, right?
Right.
Well, if you did it right or did it wrong, I might have just changed a little bit, right?
Right.
As opposed to the people that come to me and ask, now I have to do the full analysis. Like, well, let me figure this out for you.
Right.
Okay, yes, you can go do it.
Right.
I prefer the former.
Sure.
It's far greater for their career and for my mental health that they take risks.
Well, and I think when we think about it, though, in terms of our clients, there is this balance between because there's the trade for money, right?
Yeah.
That there is a balance that has to happen where, and also one of the biggest critiques of our industry, which is we went out and built this whole big thing. We didn't really communicate with you throughout the process, and now the thing is built and it's not what they want, right? So, but at the same time, you had the counter side to that is you also have, they're trusting you to make the recommendations so that they can buy into it so that you can go build the thing. Right. And so, and there's a lot of personalities involved. Some people want to be more involved. Some people are like, you're the experts, you guys tell me. Right. It's difficult in both situations. And I think there's somewhere in the middle where, we have to be with our clients where we're saying, yes, we're the experts. We recommend this. But give them an opportunity to have an insider input into that at the same time, because they are paying us ultimately to do it.
Right. And that's a really challenging thing to do sometimes, right? Because you're making decisions with your technology, your understanding of technology and their expectations and things like that. But you're making decisions that they can't necessarily make unless you educate them on, everything that so that they can see things as they should see them to make that decision.
Well, and I also think that I know that you and I both read the whole servant leadership model, and it was kind of something that I kind of came to after I had been managing or leading people for, I think, 5 or 6 years. And it ties into the relationship that you have with a client, right? Because I see it as being twofold. I see that the idea of servant leadership is that I serve the best interests of the organization, right? And then also, I think you see it another way of saying you're serving the interest of the client, right? So when you wake up every day, you have those two challenges: what is best for the organization, and then what is best for the client. And if you continue to ask those questions daily within the organization, that helps guide you to the best decisions, I think.
Right. It keeps you focused on the right things. That's for sure.
Right. And a friend of mine used to tell me, he's like, this is my decision tree for everything. He said, what is best for the organization, what is best for the client, and then what is best for me.
Yep. Good things to consider. Right. I think sometimes my challenges with clients is I do want them to be able to make these decisions, right? Especially some of them that I know, well, there's a choice and I don't know which one is best. It's really not, within my ability to say what's best for them in this case. And so for me to make a decision for them just because it's difficult to explain to them what decision they have to make, I would be negligent, I think, in doing so. So the challenge then becomes, how can I very easily and completely explain this technical complexity so that they can grasp it and go, yes, I want this or I want that.
Well, yeah. And I mean, and again, I mean, going back to the book, Dan, talking about talents and the right way to apply them. I mean, that's a talent to be able to break down a very technically difficult choice and explain to them in a layman's terms, if you will, what the choice is. Because I fear that a lot of companies in our in our industry, they propose solutions to people. Oftentimes they don't talk in language that they can understand, and then they're forced to make a choice that they're uncomfortable with, and then the result of that is they don't get the thing that they wanted in the end, right?
Nope. So I agree. Microsoft has done that to me a few times.
Right.
They asked me a question. Well, so do you want to delete this Dynamics instance? Kind of like it's just a minor question. Like just say yes or no. Well, no. Okay. Well, now that you made that decision, all of these other ramifications occurred, and for all intents and purposes, you have altered your future as a result of this. But it was your decision.
Right.
I so resent that.
Sure.
I don't want to be in the position to make my clients make a decision that they are not comfortable or capable of making efficiently, or I guess, they have to understand the details in order to decide yes or no.
Right.
And if I whitewash things or don't give them enough detail or make a decision for them, then that's.
Well, and I think the other part of this too is, I mean, the value of us being able to explain the choice to people has to be layered on top of the context of what's going on in their business, right? Because oftentimes, if we're isolated and we're applying a solution to an issue or giving choices, they may have this other thing over here going on within the organization that we don't know about. And so oftentimes enough, they have that insight that they bring to the table that say, well, as a matter of fact, Matt, we can't do this because there's this other thing going on, right? And
I would say you're a fairly small company if you don't have those types of, other things happening that the vendor isn't aware of. And it used to be, when we first started out, that we would require our clients to sit and divulge all of these things. We would just keep asking questions until we knew as much about their business operations as we needed to make really good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger the clients got, the harder that became. And plus, some of our clients don't even know what's going on in their company,
right,
or their organization. So it became impossible for us to begin with that level of knowledge. And, when we realize we're in that situation, then what can we do? We have to let our clients make those decisions and not, try and understand their environment and make them for them.
Well, and I think that oftentimes enough, at least in my experience, when I've been a part of a group of people making decisions, and the decision has been made, the next question has to always be, who will be impacted and how will they be impacted, right? I think oftentimes enough in the software, in our industry, I don't want to say it's an afterthought, but I oftentimes think that decisions get made inside of organizations, and they don't look at every vendor partner and say, how is this decision going to impact them, right? And I think that for us to be really efficient and manage their budgets in the correct way, that's the kind of thought process that needs to happen, to be stewards, if you will, for them.
Yeah.
All right. So.
And I think that's our ultimate goal, is to be stewards and guides, both of which stewards of their finances, and what they've entrusted in us to take care of, but guides through that technical complexity, so that they can make the right decisions.
Right.
Can we take a quick break?
Sure.
All right. We're back. Where were we before we took a break, Matt? I see that you've adjusted your microphone and
Right. I'm still getting, I've never held a DJ position in my life, so I'm still familiarizing myself with the technology here. But we were talking a little bit about the book. First, what is it? First
break all the rules.
Break all the rules, right? And just talking about talent, I think what we kind of see our talents and how they interact or how they're interwoven with how we deal with clients. I think also
right. What kind of an impact do those, I guess, unpolished talents actually bring to the table for from our client's perspective?
Right. Well, and I guess one question that you had kind of said not too long after, the COVID thing hit and everybody was working from home is, you had talked about how for everyone, this medium, right, is going to cause people to, connect this talent of meeting this way and doing your job is going to challenge a lot of people, right? Because there are a ton of people who are really good in person at what they do, right? Mm-hmm. I consider myself to be one of those people, right? That I'm very confident and comfortable with other people and talking and holding meaningful conversations. And this has been challenging, right? To be able to get the same, kind of collaborative feeling, right, with people.
Right. That communication, that person-to-person communication, it's
right.
It's challenging. It's different.
Yeah. And so I think that I think that's one of the things that you're seeing a lot of articles written now, obviously, about how managers and leaders can be better at leading remote teams and how they can take the job they were doing in person and be able to still do things like incentivize people to get work done and all that. And so,
have you found anything insightful? Something that helps you?
Yeah, I think that the realization that I've made is, we've all oftentimes, as a matter of practice in the running the company, have always said, over communicate, right? Over communicate with your clients. We have this sort of unwritten rule that when a client emails us, we're very responsive. When a client calls, we're very, that's synonymous with the service side of our business, right? But I think now in our environment now, and as much as can reasonably be done, I think you got to over communicate internally with, what decisions we're making, and over communicate with your clients, because, that gives people the sense that you're engaged with their issues, their problems. Even though this medium is not the best, at least I'm seeing you and we're talking, right?
I got a little story about that. I'm moving our website from its current host to another host, to reduce risk and increase our security and all of that stuff. But during the process, I had to request support from this team. And I requested support, and almost immediately, like within 2 minutes, the CEO of that company had messaged me through support and said, "Thank you for reaching out to us. We're definitely going to get to you. In fact, so-and-so is going to take care of you." And then about a minute later, so-and-so got on the same chat feed and said, "Hey, thanks for contacting us. What would be the best way to start? Should we have a call? Can we do this over chat? What do you prefer, Dan?"
Right.
And I said chat, and boom, here comes another message from the CEO that said, "Great. We'll be able to take care of you wonderfully through that medium. Here's what it's going to look like." And then the other guy came back, and as far as over communicating, they were almost communicating like they were standing right next to me and telling me, here's what's going to happen, Dan. Here, we'll just guide you through the whole process.
Right.
Definitely along the lines of over communicating.
Right.
But one other thing that they did, they gave me the facts, right? The things that I absolutely had to know, like this is how this support request is going to take or going to go. This is the person that's working on it. When this person is off shift in 4 hours and 17 minutes, so-and-so will take over and they'll run with your I mean, they just gave me all of the information that I would have possibly needed. And the other thing that they did was they were very informal. They were formal about giving me that information, but they also thanked me. Hey, thanks for reaching out to us. And if you had any bad experiences with support, we hope that we do a much better job. We just really want you to be happy. And those kind of things, I think we should adopt in our practice. Not only over communicate, but over communicate in a way that is friendly and real and vulnerable, right? It makes us vulnerable. When you take the risk to say, hey, I hope you're having a good day today to a client, right? The risk is that, I mean, maybe I hope you're having a good day isn't very risky, but it's more risky than not saying it. Not saying, I hope you have a good day hasn't implied to the client that you think you're in a position to wish them a good day or that you're friendly with them or that you're anything but a vendor. Right. But I think it's important to do that. Show that vulnerability. Hey, I know you haven't asked me, but I hope you have a happy Mother's Day.
All right.
Like that.
I think that when I think of over communication, also though, in what you just described was the respect that you have for a client to explain to them what your process is, right? Oftentimes enough, we look at our internal workings as far as steps that we're taking to execute your work. And oftentimes we don't allow them to see inside of the box that is the way we do our work, right? But oftentimes enough when we share with them, okay, just like you're describing your interaction. So here's how you start a software development project with illumisoft. Here's what's going to happen, right? First thing we're going to do is, and walking them through the way the process is going to work so they know what to expect. So that hopefully we've just done a good enough job describing that what happens is they begin to kind of pick up on the pattern that is the process, right? They go, oh yeah, right now, like you described in the beginning, the next thing that's going to happen is this thing, right? And you're like, got it, and cool. Right.
Yeah, it makes me feel good. I know when and where.
Exactly. And so I think that, and I think we've made a lot of strides in that direction. But I also think there's a huge amount of an area for improvement. And quite frankly, this podcast is another way to be able to do that. But also, again, I mean, a lot of these conversations at the beginning of projects were in person, right? And now we've got to be able to convey that same level of trust and that same level of respect in a different medium. But that's challenging but solvable, right? But we've still got to figure out the way to convey that emotional thing, right? You're giving us money, we're taking it, we're going to go execute this process, you're a part of it. You got to feel connected to it all, right? And that's the emotional side of that is crucial to be able to get across to them, right? So
the emotional side is crucial to get across to our clients, across to really anybody that we're communicating in this medium. Right. I think we need to get good at it, right? I've said that from the first day of lockdown. Like, this is going to be the future. If you can't present yourself well on camera through Zoom and have that experience produce a result in the person you're talking to, then you need to learn how.
I think that what I'm really saying though, Dan, is that it's easier to discuss emotions in person for some people, right? And I think that you're now having to get really good at talking about emotions virtually, right? So
Like
now
what
you
kind of emotions do you mean?
well think about it like
Give me an
this.
example if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I know some of our clients that if they are concerned with the direction of a project, the budget of a project, in the past, they have been more than willing to share that with us in person, right? Um, and for some reason, and there's a lot of reasons why, right? So you got to, there's always got to sit down with your kid, and I got to tell you something, about your behavior, right? That's where that's kind of born from, I think. But it's some people are just not as good at it on the phone or on a Zoom call, right? To say, I'm not happy with this, or I'm not happy with where this is headed, or they're just not comfortable doing that. So I think the challenge for us is to be able to ask questions. And to your point, I mean, vulnerability might not be the word that I'm thinking of, but I think getting out of them, right, what their sense of how the project's going. I mean, oftentimes that's the question I'm asking our clients all the time, right? How do you think everything's going, right? Tell me what you think of how this process is going, or this process is working. Tell me what your reaction to that is, right? Asking them those questions, trying to get out of them, basically satisfaction, right? Right.
I think when you're face to face with clients, I have a particular client in mind when I'm thinking of this, but I think it's true across the board. You see more of the things that would express their emotion, right? You see the disappointment, right? If there is disappointment, you see the satisfaction,
right?
If there is satisfaction, even if they want to hide it, right? It seems like they can't hide it,
right?
When you get on these calls, it's easy to turn your video off, and it's easy to mute yourself and talk bad, and say the things that you're feeling, and then get back on the mic and put a smile on your face. And and I don't really know what the motivation to do that would be, but I do know that we're, as people, we have different levels of comfort in getting on this thing and turning your video on, or talking into the microphone, or calling people out, right, in an environment like this that you're not used to being in. You can call them out maybe in person because you'll reach over and you put your hand on them or something, so that you can reduce the impact of your statement, but yeah, I honestly, I think we need to get good at it. Right. You and me and Steve and the rest of illumisoft, because we realize that this is a challenge that the rest of the world is facing too. So this is our opportunity to add a greater level of value. I don't know if if our competitors have realized that this is as important as it is, but if they haven't, then all the more power to us. Let's make sure the clients, our current clients and our future clients, know that we're dedicated to making sure that we present ourselves in front of them in a way that reduces friction. Right. So,
well, and I think that, I think that the world can learn a lot about ourselves through comedy.
Yeah.
I think comedy makes you kind of laugh at yourself and not take yourself so seriously. And there's a bunch of life lessons that I've learned from some of the best comedians in the world. And one of the things that it has taught me is the ability to read an audience, right? Whether your audience, knowing the room, as they say in comedy, right?
Yeah.
You got to know your audience well enough to know, and this is another challenge that you could do in person in a room full of 5 or 6 other people, right? You read their body language and kind of see that they're doing this. They don't really understand, like, what is he saying? Right. What is it? But yeah, getting better at knowing your audience in this medium, is crucial. And the only way that you can really do it adeptly is not really do it well, is to really ask good questions.
Right.
Right.
You can't read people as easily.
Right.
You can't even see their whole body. They could be tapping their foot and you might not even know it.
Right.
Or you might think they just have to go pee and they're waiting for the call to get over. I don't know.
Right. Who knows? Right.
But yeah, I agree. Asking those questions, getting the feedback in a different way, in a way that this medium provides. Like, is everybody following me? And I've seen before in our meetings where we are communicating with clients, and I realize that I have lost track of whether the client is tracking the conversation. So I think that's something that we need to learn just right here and now, is that we should probably, as people that are wanting to master this form of interaction, to ask more questions, is constantly ask questions. Are you following me? Did you track on that last sentence, right? Did you track the last paragraph? And replaying it for them. Say, okay, well, in the last 5 minutes, we talked about this, and it's led us here, right? So that everybody can regroup. Right. I think we all get distracted unintentionally. You know, the dog makes a noise that we weren't expecting them to make, and our focus momentarily changes to that. And then when it changes back to this call, we may have missed the leap, right? So restating where we've been and stating where we're going frequently would probably help everybody on the call.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that we try to do with most of our clients is, you know, I'm a fan of, you know, structured agendas in some cases, you know, mainly because, you know, it tells the audience very clearly, here's what we're going to talk about. Here's kind of some issues or problems that we need to solve for. People go into meetings knowing what we're expecting to accomplish, right? And I think right now, in a lot of these kind of interactions with both coworkers and with clients, I think that the medium presents itself as like, it's just kind of a casual kind of conversation, and we're going to get on this call and we're going to kind of meander our way through a couple of topics, and maybe we'll make some decisions and maybe we won't. You know, I think that because of the medium, some people create that assumption around how the meeting is going to go. And I think agendas for me are like, no, here are the topics. Here are the topics we're going to talk about. Here's the order in which we're going to talk about them. And of course it's flexible and dynamic as we need it to be, but at least people know what we're trying to get accomplished in the time that we're here. Right.
Agendas are great, but they aren't worth anything if we don't enforce them, or if we don't have somebody running the meeting. Right. So, running a meeting with a client while having an agenda requires quite a bit of tact, right? Because we have to let them talk when they're ready to talk, even if we're ready to move on. So,
sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's a fine balance. And I at the minute that I thought that I was really good at it, you start to run when the dynamics of the people that you're in the meeting with change. That's the moment that I realize I'm not as good as what I thought I was, right? Because in our experience, right, I'm thinking of one particular client specifically. You know, I've never, before I started working at illumisoft, ever facilitated a meeting with a bunch of scientists, right? That group of people is a particular challenge because they are not typical business people in terms of let's get in, let's get it done, and I got to move on to the next thing, right? That's a typical business meeting. Scientists like to educate and inform and sort of pose theories and questions. Not always conducive to running a meeting really efficiently, right? So,
not conducive to getting to the result that you're looking for.
Right. And so now that's asking the facilitator or whoever's running the meeting. You're going to have to. You're a careful guide, right? You're trying to get us gradually respecting their insights and opinions, and you're guiding them very, very, very carefully to can we get to the decision that we're trying to get to here, right?
Right.
So,
And that's a real talent right there. I mean, it's going back to the definitions for first break all the rules.
right.
I keep forgetting that guy's name.
Ben, you said, right?
No, it's Don some or another. Don Clifton.
Oh, okay.
It's not really a talent. Those are skills, right? Being able to tactfully keep people moving towards your stated goal. I don't know that you can actually acquire that skill without doing it and doing it over and over and over and over and over, right? Kind of like stand up, right?
Yeah,
I've come, going back to that statement that you said, I think you're absolutely right. Humor has a way of highlighting or, displaying the world to you, some of its more negative parts in a way that don't make you cringe and fear and hide from them.
Right.
And I've thought recently that it would probably help me grow as a person to get up on stage and develop a stand-up routine, just, to be able to read people like that, right? To read a room, to be able to, I don't know, be funny about things that, I don't really find a whole lot funny in the world.
Not right now, right?
Very little, right? I don't think that's a talent of mine. My talent is looking at things and finding the part that's not right. And then somehow acting on it. Right now, what I do to act on it isn't, my favorite thing. I just get angry or, get hurt or get something.
Right.
But I would love to be able to develop that and point and see these things and then find the humor in them to share them with people.
Right.
Because I think it would help me in business. I think it would help me in this medium to be able to communicate better with you and with, everybody that I get on a Zoom call with. Unfortunately, most of the comedy clubs have shut down. Maybe I gotta start doing comedy like this.
Right. This would be a great.
But again, I don't think you can read your clients. You can read your audience. I mean,
well, here's the true story, Dan. The true story when I was growing up was the fastest way for me to get attention, usually from girls, and even sometimes other people, was through comedy. Right?
Was a joker?
Right.
A joker, man?
Right. If I was the funny kid in class, then I got noticed by a girl that I liked. Right. So comedy was used, for me for a number of reasons when I was a kid. So, but as I got kind of into the business kind of world, comedy says that I cannot take myself seriously. That's within me. Right. I may present to you like I take myself very seriously, but at the end of the day, as I've gotten a little bit older, you get comfortable with yourself. I'm the best person in the world at self-deprecating humor. So, and well,
let's hear some.
Right,
let's hear your self-deprecating routine.
Right.
No,
but yeah, I mean, I think also, honestly, what I find is comedy disarms people, right? It kind of, if you're in a meeting with a client, and obviously there are rules to the road of comedy in the workplace or with a client, but if there's an opportunity to kind of either make fun of yourself as a client or you've got a good enough relationship with a client that they know how you are. And I have one client in mind of ours that I could probably do that with. I think every environment could always use a little humor. Right. And I think in our current environment, especially, making people laugh is a good thing. Right now.
It kind of goes back to what I was saying a little while ago about formality and vulnerability. I used to be funny when I was a kid. I used to try and I could make people laugh, and somewhere I lost the desire to do that.
All right.
I mean, I still like making people laugh, but I apparently don't like it enough to put any effort into it. I'm far more serious, right?
Right.
I would like to enlighten people or share some insight or that kind of thing.
Right.
So I've become less of a joker. But as far as communicating with client, I think you need the business, right? You need the agenda. You need to go through it, but you need to do it in a way that expresses your realization that they're human and that they are emotional beings. And you got to say, look, I hope you are enjoying your day, or I hope your daughter is okay. Or, you've got to go there. You've got to go there and embrace the human part of it. Comedy does that really well. And not only does it, it makes them laugh and want to be near you. If
Well,
it's
and
good, then they want to do it.
And I also think, Dan, the process that we follow to engage with new clients, right? Is that it's even more important, again, going back to this medium, it's even more important and even more challenging to you have to pay attention, right? And that may sound like a really simple statement, but it's even more challenging now to pay attention to people and what's going on. So as an example, when I had been in like a business development role for a company, and I was working with another guy, and he was a few years older than I was, but he was a top-notch kind of sales professional. And I would go into the meeting, and I was great at reading the person across the table and seeing if I was engaged with them and if they were understanding what we were trying to get done for them and all this stuff. But he was really good at asking questions about the guy or a girl across the table that were much more deeper, and got to know them in an hour's worth of time at a much deeper level. And so we would walk out of the meetings oftentimes and we would compare notes. And he would say to me things like, Matt, did you see that he had a picture of his kid behind him on the bookshelf in the football uniform?
Right.
And did you notice that he had that book on the shelf that talked about blah, blah, blah? And so then what we would do is we would interweave that knowledge into how we would interact with him, right? And some of that stuff just sounds like common human observation or knowledge, but it's so oftentimes stuff that we just don't even pay attention to.
It's compassion.
Right.
I mean, that's what I think compassion is, recognizing who somebody is. And when you come into their office, people put themselves on display there, either because they want their office to look nice or, because they think they're supposed to, but you walk in there and that's just like, here's my soul.
Right.
These shelves.
Right. And so whether that's an office or a cubicle or whatever, now we have this, right? And this is the extent of which we can get to know, illumisoft by looking at Dan, what's Dan's got going on in the background, looking at me and what I got going on, right? So,
what do we have going on, Matt? Let's do a little analysis.
Dan, you obviously you've got some whiteboards in the background here. I see we've got the walls painted the team colors of illumisoft.
Empty chairs,
right?
All of our people are at home,
right?
On Sunday,
right. And me, look at me. I have this blank slate behind me, which is what I am.
Yeah. It is blank back there.
Yeah.
Might want to put your PhD, your doctorate, your certificates,
right,
and those kinds of things.
Right. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm envisioning now where we're in the process right now of, ramping up a sales and marketing effort right now. And I'm anticipating having many calls like this, right, with people and the
practicing your routine,
right?
Your comedy routine,
a little bit, right? But the ability to be able to have a meeting like this in this tiny little window and getting to know them and what they're about in a brief period of time, so that I know I have enough confidence to go out and say to them, this is how we can help. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And I think practice makes perfect. So we just need to do it more and more and more.
Sure.
I think our problems, I say ours, but I think in general, people's problems with adopting this medium and really enjoying it is that they're not good at it at first. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to say things that would have produced the result that we wanted in person, but that don't here.
Well, and I'm guilty of this too, right? You're really good at staying within the window of the Zoom call, right? And I'm kind of always moving about, right? But the funniest,
I am sitting down versus you're at a stand-up desk,
right? But I have this meeting every Friday with this group of data scientists, and I have nothing against data scientists, but there's this guy on the call, and every time we're on the call, we're all on Zoom, and I mean, this guy is like this. He's like, he's like, yeah, hey, how's it going? It's like barely in the frame, and it's like, are you shy? Maybe he's shy, right? Maybe he's shy. I didn't want to be on camera. I don't want to. Whatever. So,
or maybe he's just looking at other people's view and not at all at his.
Right.
I call my mom on Alexa, and this is the view I get.
Because you don't think she wants to see or. No.
I don't think she, when she's looking at the Alexa device, she sees my face in the main part of the screen, and hers is just a little box up in the corner, and she doesn't bother to look at it.
So one of that reminds me of the story that when we were in the middle of like March, April, it was when everybody was just locked down and we were all just, going through it for the first time. On a fairly periodic basis, I see my parents. And so, I was thinking, and everybody, and we were all gravitating towards Zoom. And I was like, I wonder if I could get my mom on Zoom. Mm-hmm. And so I sent her like an invite, and I explained to her how to set up her camera, and we got her all set up. I got her on, we had the audio on, we were talking, and she was trying to figure out the camera. And so she had one of those windows, on your webcam that you slide down or slide up. And she had it slid down, and she figured out she's got to slide it up. So she slid it up, and I think she saw me, and she didn't realize it was going to be like, I was going to be like right there. And she's like, oh my God, I haven't done my hair. And I go, Mom, don't worry about it. It's fine. I'm sitting here in a t-shirt.
Just move your camera like that.
Right. Right. So, but.
Well, is she getting the hang of it?
Yeah, I think she is, it's funny because, we are, I mean, maybe not we, I should say, oftentimes the criticism of people that are older is they're not interested in new technology, or they're not good with new technology, but, they're adapting like we all are. So, and especially, when it comes to seeing your family, right, they'll figure out just about anything to see their family. So
that's a good thing. I've appreciated not just Zoom. In fact, it's been kind of hard to get people on Zoom for some reason. I guess it's that negative news when we first went into lockdown about, being insecure and people being able to join calls, things like that. But you've got Hangouts, you've got Skype, you've got, I don't know, Facebook Messenger,
Google Meet, all those, right?
Well, Google Meet is Google Hangouts.
Is it the same thing? Right?
Multiple names, I guess.
Yeah.
But I've really appreciated having this ability to reach out to people and see them. And, like my cousins in California, I don't get to see them a whole lot, but now I can see them every week. Hey, how you guys been? And et cetera. And so, we've had this technology available to us for some time. I don't know how long, but we haven't really used it. Now that I'm using it, I'm forced to use it for business. I'm seeing just a huge benefit to it. I can reach out to people like my son in Austin and have a good weekly conversation with him for about 30 minutes or an hour. And I get to see him.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's funny to me that what 1990s, early 2000s was when what WebEx first came out with their product,
Mm-hmm. I think
right?
so, right around there.
And that's the sort of origin story, if you will, of all this technology was when we first learned that we could meet and see each other and share documents and all that stuff. So,
Yep, it's amazing. I wonder, you talked a little while ago about our clients and having to learn this way of communicating
right.
to get to them, not to get to them, but to be able to have a real conversation over a platform that doesn't allow for face-to-face in-person
Right.
meetings. What do you think their experience is? I mean, I would like to use, we've been going an hour and 40 minutes, so we got about another 20 minutes. I'd like to try and understand, and for anybody that's still listening to this episode, if you're a prospective client or you know somebody that wants to be,
Right.
let's talk a little bit about what the process is that they could experience or would experience with us from day one. They go to our website. Let's take it from there.
Yeah, and so I'm going to answer that in a different way. So, and not that we're using our podcast to endorse other companies, but recently we had the experience of trying to find a new company to help us with our chat box, right?
On our website.
Yeah, right.
We had HubSpots,
Right.
and which works good.
And granted, I'm kind of comparing a simpler service to a little bit more of a complex service like ours. But the company was Chatmetrics out of Australia. And I think they're a relatively small company, but their technology seems to be pretty good. But more impressive than that was just the process that they kind of walked us through to get signed up, right? Mm-hmm. Their process that they followed was, we got on the phone with the CEO. He very, very simply explained what the service was, how much it cost, what some of the benefits were to using their service, say over a different service. And it was so simplified.
I loved it.
Yeah. And it was so easy to say yes.
Within 5 minutes of getting on the phone with this guy,
right,
I said, well, that makes a lot of sense. That's a no-brainer.
Right.
Most people don't take the time to communicate their value offering in a clear, concise way.
Absolutely.
And he had it down. He didn't even tell us he was a CEO.
Right.
And he just said, hey guys, this is what we're doing and this is how it works.
Right.
I dug it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, we asked we even asked him a question of, you asked him specifically, like, have you ever done this for software development companies? Mm-hmm. And he was like, well, no, not really. But, I kind of think that it's beneficial for anybody in these kinds of ways, and explained it. And so I guess using that as a good example, I think that's in a little bit more of a complex way is what I want to be able to from the moment a client says, I have an interest in your service, to the moment that they become a partner. I want it to feel that simple, right? I want it to feel like, again, going back to what we said earlier, which is, hey, I have a certain level of interest in what you guys do and doing a project with you. Here's how the process works, right? And right now, the way the process works is we've learned through trial and error, the best way for us to really get to know you as a client is to really not just understand what you want us to go build for you, but to understand your business, right? And I think that's a mistake right off the bat that a lot of companies don't do, is they get the call, right? The client says, I want you to go build me this thing. And some of our folks that do this, or their brains start spinning and they're immediately building the thing in their head, right? And they're like, okay, we could do it this way, and we could use this technology, and we could do this. And I think that's all relatively fine. But I think the bigger thing to understand is, let's start asking about their business and about their company and about them, right? Because you're getting ready to potentially engage with these people, in our opinion, for a really long time. And you're going to get to know these people pretty well over the course of the relationship. So you better, I mean, at least this is the way I see it, you better want to work with those clients as people, right?
Right.
And yeah, whatever they want you to go build may be the newest, coolest thing in the world, and you want to stamp your name on it, but you better like to be able to work with that person, right? And so I want to ask questions about the business and how the business is structured and what the goals of the business are, and how that interweaves with what we're going to do for them, right? If I build,
so trying to gauge their moral compass.
yeah, that's a little bit hard, but I think, like a good question, I think I would ask, or I like to ask is how did you learn how to do business, right? Like, how did you get into the business of what it is that you're into? Like, or if they're not the C-level person, they're some other maybe role in the company. So why are you a part of this organization, right? Why do you like working? Why do you like doing your job, right?
Do you find that people have the answers readily available for those, or did that cause them to dig a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. But oftentimes what I'm getting at is I'm trying to get to know the person across the table from me that I'm going to build a partnership with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the questions I think sometimes can be a little bit uncomfortable for them to answer, especially if you're early on in the relationship. But I think like today, right now, Dan, with the clients that we've had and the length of time that we've had them, I wouldn't go so far as to say we entirely know our clients as people, but I think we're pretty close to knowing who they are and what's important in their lives and what matters to them in their jobs and their roles and in their companies, and how and answering the very simple question of how we can make them successful in their jobs, right? By the way that they use us. So I think, again, going back to kind of what we talked about earlier, I think a lot of the front end of our work, the very first step that we take in the process is understand what they want us to go build and doing some deep dives into what they understand they want to go build, and then having a deep enough dive into the company and why they're wanting to go on this journey of building this thing, right? Why is it that you're wanting to take this amount of money to go build this thing, right? Oftentimes I know you've told this story before, Dan, but oftentimes we'll run into clients who say, we think we want to go build this thing. And we say, why not go just get that thing off the shelf and use that? Right.
This is kind of a thing. I don't know why, but people will see an app out there and they can imagine it being better.
Mm.
And so often they want to come to me and have us build that new product. Right. And that's not a bad idea, right? Better mousetrap. Right. But they don't understand what they're getting into, right? Yes, we can build that for you. And yes, you can make all the money you want to make on it, but here's your hurdles, right? You've got to beat that company who's already got a head start on you. And are your, enhancements or the things that you see that make it yours really valuable out there? Have you done any testing? Do you know that it will produce the results that you want? And if they can't prove any of that stuff, then I'm going to send them to go find out before we build their product. Last thing I'm going to do is take their money to build them an app if I am not confident that they're going to be successful,
right,
having done it.
Right. And so part of the first step in the process is to do this sort of like deep dive, as we call it, both, like I said, both with the technology and the solution, mm-hmm. and with them as individuals and as a company or a person in the company. And I think, to your point, at the end of that first part of that, the end of that first step oftentimes is a confirmation of, are we moving to the second step, or are we into the reconsideration step, right? Are they needing to reconsider the idea because we've asked them a bunch of really good questions, right, that they haven't thought of, and they probably need to go think about it, right? But in some cases, in the cases where they're like, we've gone through the deep dive, they understood, all the questions, they've answered them, and they're still very positive about wanting to move forward. And I think that in that stage of the game, we've started to offer solutions or ideas about how we could use our expertise to help them solve that problem, right? So in that stage of the game, we're already starting to think about ways to demonstrate our expertise. We're already thinking of ways that we can correlate what they're trying to get done to something else that we may have done, right? But we're still keeping the focus on them. All the while, we're still really trying to help them understand we're able to do what they're asking, right? So I think after that, the next stage is that when they move on to the next stage after we've done the deep dive, I think it's, what I would consider to be sort of the moment of commitment, right? Are they committed? Or they're committed to the project enough to want to start to, sign some things with us, to want to sign
disclosure, that kind of stuff.
Right. And then I think after we've got that commitment, and I do think that one of the mistakes, we've even made in the past, but is to be really clear. Part of a commitment from our potential clients is understanding their money, understanding their budget, right? Understanding, are you building a phase one of a product? And you have 3 phases, right?
Right. Are you building an MVP, or are you wanting a full-fledged product that's going to challenge some other thing? We have to know what their motivation is.
Right. So I think that our best practice is to understand their budget and their expectations before they ever sign any sort of document to begin work with us. If we're not comfortable at that stage when they want to sign to begin work, and we don't have clarity around all of that, then that's not a good way to start a project.
The chances of that project not producing the result that we want it to is pretty good.
Right.
So the result that we want it to is probably important to mention, right? We want our clients to be successful. If they're going to have us build them some software, when we're done building it, and hopefully throughout the entire process, I would love for them to want to smile when they think of us.
Sure.
Right. So what does it take to produce that kind of level of satisfaction?
Right.
After the project is over, right? I want them to think, man, that was a good thing. Much like we did with Chat Metrics, right? We left that call movement. This is going to be hard for them to ruin their reputation with us. I know. I really doubt that they will.
Right. All right. And so, once the clients in my mind, they begin to sign the non-disclosure and do all those things, I think our approach has been, unless the clients have expressed a different way that they want to go about doing it, our goal is to go out and build that initial, first MVP, or that first sort of, like, for lack of a better term, draft of what it is that they're wanting us to go build. Right. And then begin to iterate off of that. I know there's a lot of discussion and, around being using the agile process and all that. And I think we follow that fairly well. And I think that, one of the things that is crucial, and part of that iteration process is, as let's say we've iterated 3 or 4 times during the process in some ways, and they've really started to understand, and take the idea starts to take shape for them, right? Because now they're using it and they're seeing it. I still think that the one of the crucial things as we're iterating is to continue to ask good questions about questions like this. Have you ever thought of having this particular feature, or have you ever considered building it or having it interact in this different way? Right? Continuing with them to explore maybe ideas that they're not ready to implement, but definitely ideas that they need to consider that could make it much more valuable to their clients or their internal group or whoever the audience is, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. Because oftentimes enough, I think that what we find, and when we talk about the sales process and the way it works and how it's then sort of transferred off to the operations to deliver or developers to deliver, we think it's a baton, right? We think sales, operations, and then the level of engagement isn't nearly as high, right? And I think that's a mistake that oftentimes companies make, is that they don't stay engaged from the beginning of the process, from all the different aspects of it, right?
Oh, we've had that experience just this week too, right?
Right.
We engaged with the company to do some lead generation for us, and it seemed like a really good fit. And then one by one, the people that we were dealing with stepped out of the picture and replaced themselves with somebody else. And that feeling is gone now that we're on the same page. Like, I don't even know who I'm talking to.
Right. Right. Or the expectations that, as maybe, in my role in business development, the expectations of the level of service that you're going to get, that I described for you at the beginning. And then I roll out the person delivering it, and he or she isn't delivering it the way that I described it would be, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the experience that you're talking about that we're having with the lead generation company is, we were like super engaged and ready to go. And then all of a sudden it was like this letdown after we actually began the work, right?
Well, it was a letdown in terms of the person I was talking to. They were engaged and energetic, and I liked them. And then the person that they replaced them with wasn't. And so there's an inconsistency in there.
Right.
I have to admit that I've also done that to clients. Right.
Sure.
Not a bait and switch, because it was, I let them know up front, like, I'm not the one that's going to be doing this. I'm going to bring somebody in. But if I'm the one making the sale and I'm sharing with them what my values are and what the company's values are, and then I bring somebody in and they can't articulate those in the same way, in the same manner, and provide that consistency, then I failed, which I try not to do as much anymore. And we need to do a better job.
Yeah.
We always do. I think there's always room for improvement in improving the client's journey through this process. Technology is difficult to do for a client. I think their experience with us has got to be a rather fearful one, because it's expensive, right? And they are often betting their future on it, right? Or their company's future, or at least making a significant investment. And anytime anybody does that, they want to make sure that they're going to have some reasonable expectation that they will get a return on that investment. And also, if they were able to do the technology, if they were able to understand it and able to know exactly what they were asking us to build, that would give them some comfort. But if they had that, then they wouldn't be coming to us asking us to build it.
Right.
So there's an inherent vulnerability that our clients have to accept in their role as the client, I guess, and utilizing a technical vendor. And that's a really hard role to be in, I guess, because you are vulnerable. Some of our clients take the approach of protecting themselves from us. For instance, some of those behaviors might be, we don't want to share our budget with you because we're worried that you will then give us an estimate that utilizes the entire budget rather than what it should be, right?
Right.
And that's understandable. Another way that they might handle that is just to find somebody that they truly trust, right? And then bet the farm on that they know how to read people, right?
Right.
I prefer the latter, right? Because this technology is difficult and it's complicated, and you don't know where you're going most of the time until you have all the information, which we don't have when we engage in a client in the beginning. It takes a long time to get them to divulge that stuff. And the black swan may not be at the beginning. It may be towards the very end. We've started the project already. We think we're going to build this. And then we realize, oh, this is the one piece of information we didn't have, but it changes everything.
I think that's a good point. I think and a lot of people are hesitant to do this, but I think if I was purchasing software development and I was doing what I would consider to be my due diligence, my question to a company like illumisoft would be, what's going to go wrong? Right? Because invariably something will go wrong, right? Is something going to go wrong technically? Like something's going to break, something's not going to work right? What do you think that's going to be, right? Is something going to go wrong with the way you guys service me, right? I think that those are questions that they're fearful to ask, right? Is because we want to assume that everything's going to go right and perfect and there aren't going to be any issues and all that. Not that we convey that to people, but that's sort of the unwritten understanding that when you enter into a new relationship with somebody is that you've got your process kind of figured out. I'm assuming you do, right?
Right.
But in a way, I kind of feel like, that we need to be good stewards to new clients and just say, there are things that can go wrong in a project, especially in a technology project. We're going to do our very best to minimize those things from happening, but I want you to understand that there will be things that go wrong. And for our sake and our expertise and our experience, we are confident that we can minimize those things, but
right.
Don't go into this thinking,
Oh, that's a good point. And I don't know if I would state it very, like that.
Right.
Exactly. I might say something that not everything is going to go right, which is the same statement, but a little bit different, which makes me think that perhaps we should represent ourselves different. We're not really the people that know exactly how to take you from where you're at to where you want to go. We're the people that know how to figure it out.
Right.
And that's really what our role is as a technology partner, is to help them figure it out.
Right. Well, I have a question though. If you were to think about our current list of clients, what percentage of those would you say are you would be confident to say they understand technology?
None of them.
Right.
I mean, some of them understand it better than others, but they all depend on us to guide them in the right direction. Some of them depend on us and don't want to admit it, or even to themselves, right? So they're the ones that are holding their cards close to their chest and won't share their budget because they think, we're software vendors and, maybe they've had a bad experience or something. But
so in rare cases though, Dan, do we run into clients who come to us and they understand technology? I'm thinking of one client that I think I would consider to be fairly well understanding of technology. And they came to us with very specific requirements of what they wanted us to go build for them. Right. It was like, we need you to go code this thing to do this thing specifically. Right. They were developers themselves. Remember?
Yeah.
And
you're
so
talking about NeuroGen?
Yeah. And so, but they are the rare instance, right? Where
they definitely are. Right. And there were turns in that, twists and turns in that project, both in terms of what they wanted to build and how they wanted to build it, but as a result, and what it was going to cost and what the expectation and the estimate was. Right. So they were great to work with because they understood those things. And as soon as we found, hey, this is what you guys asked for, but we need to think again on it. Right. They were very open and reasonable to reconsider everything as a result of those little things. And that's what made that project a success, quite honestly, is that they weren't stuck on fulfilling the contract per letter, or to the letter. They knew in the beginning that the contract was just a vision for the future, but actually taking the journey is going to make the vision what it really is, rather than what we imagine it might be.
Right. But from the perspective of having that additional obstacle or hurdle to overcome, where I think it was challenging for different reasons, but it wasn't, the reason it was challenging wasn't because they didn't understand technology.
No, I mean, we made it through that project. They're successful.
Right.
They're doing good. Our challenges were on our side in providing consistent service, because we were ramping up so many people at once at that time. I take full responsibility for any failure to delight them that there was. And honestly, I don't think there were any. I think they were delighted with us when we were done.
And all I was trying to highlight, though, on that was just the difference between the other groups of our clients who are non-technical, right? And you've got that additional obstacle to overcome, to not only explain to them our process, but also explain to them the technology, right? We just didn't have that additional hurdle with Neurogen because they were technologists, right? Yeah.
And similar with the Children's Mercy DEXI project.
Right.
I mean, they knew what they wanted to do technically. Now, we came in there and we talked them into doing it a different way, because it was a more maintainable, simpler solution for them going forward. But they appreciated that, and we adopted that new way. The results were what they were looking for. So that was also another instance where the technology, the knowledge of technology and how to work with technology was in place with the client already. That's a long-running project. Right. The reason that we're doing so well with them is because we all get along really well and we all understand each other. I don't know how to take that and make it universal across the board, because I don't think we can. I don't think we can expect our clients to understand technology to the level that those two did. No, but I was getting ready to say that we don't prefer one client of one type versus another client of a different type, right? Because quite frankly, they're both just challenging for different reasons, right? We got to do a good job educating them about the technology and the solution, whether it's one client or another client who potentially has an understanding of the technology. There's a different challenge, which is, potentially offering a different idea or something that they hadn't thought of, right? Right. Because they, a lot of the technical people that we run into, they've got a very defined solution, and they think that they just want to hire us to go do it, and they just need to figure out ways to still be open to some different ideas. So, well, I completely agree with that assessment. I would like to, we're at 2 hours and 9 minutes, so we should probably wrap this up, but I would like to maybe next week or later this week, go through what a client experiences with us from the time they decide to research technology companies through the end of a project, and just walk through for our listeners and for ourselves what we expect that process to be. I would like to at least get it defined out here for people so that they know what they can expect from us. But I'd also like to talk about our strengths and weaknesses in that process so that people know where we're at and can hopefully help us make it better. Right? Because we can try from our side all we want, but we can't perfect our engagement unless we have people, giving us feedback and engaging with us. Sure. So that will be interesting, I hope. An interesting podcast. Sure. Recently hired a producer, I guess you would say, for these. So we'll be able to pump them out a little bit quicker and hopefully in a little bit more professional result. Right. So do you think we could add like a laugh track? Are you going to start telling jokes?
Right.
Let's
Come
do
on. Right. So,
We will probably add, a link to our website or something on here. We'll add some gradients to the background and make it look professional. But honestly, Matt, I think the value of these podcasts to our audience, to our clients, is that they get to know us and who we are and what to expect from us, and some of the challenges that we've been through and how we handle them. Again, gives them ability to.
right. It's well, I get it. We're not trying to entertain by any means, but
But if you could tell some jokes, that would be good.
I'll still have to work into my material for next week. But yeah, no, yeah, we're I think me and you are both clear about what the goal of this whole thing is, right? Is educate, understand, what it's like to do business with us, what it's like to interact with us.
This gives people a really good view of what it's like to interact with us over a Zoom call, which
right
is going to be the default. Hey,
right. So and I think we at least I talk a lot about values, right? I think through this medium, you start to understand what our values are in business and even a little bit maybe in our personal lives. So, so I think that hopefully by the end of episode 3 or 4, they're starting to get a sense of, who Dan is, who Matt is. Sure. Right. So
right.
that
probably thinking these guys don't have a whole lot to talk about, do they?
Well, or if at minimum they say, hey, I need to talk to these guys, at least when they pick up the phone to call, I think they already kind of have, maybe they know us a little bit better. Right?
Hopefully. Yeah. So. Yep. All right. Well, as usual, Matt, I enjoyed the conversation.
Sure.
And have a great day, man.
All right. Till next week.
All right. Bye.
See ya.